this is not an easy or inexpensive problem to handle.
In today's video, Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, discusses where we are in the changing world order, the macroeconomic outlook, and the rising tensions between the US and China.
Well, let's go exactly there, because you know China very well. You've spent a lot of time there. You've invested there over the years. What do you make of the situation with the US and China? You said some things that we really think we're heading in a bad direction right now.
Right now, there are irreconcilable differences on a number of topics. Taiwan, Russia, reverse CFIUS, chips, and so on. They're kind of at the edge. And that there's an inability to talk. So there's quite a bit of brinksmanship. And we are also heading into a political year here in which there's going to be more pressure. Both sides are very worried about this. So I think you're going to see restraint. I don't think it's going to lead to a terrible situation in terms of, but it is leading, you're going to see restraint in a period of time where you're going to see more tensions. There's the Mike Gallagher's commission and so on, more pressure with chips and so on and so forth. I don't think that that's going to cross the line, but it is going to raise tensions. You will see also more attempts, Tony Blinken's going over, you'll see more attempts to try to smooth things out because both sides are afraid of where we are. In any case, while it'll be that kind of brinksmanship, most likely there's a building of self-sufficiency. In other words, efficiency was the game before. Everything was global. You produce it in wherever the cheapest place was, most cost effective, and we became very intertwined with each other. Now in this global world, there's the worry about being cut off in all sorts of things. And so you're having that dynamic play, a negative role in economics and inflation.
In thinking about the U.S. relationship with China, which I think is probably the most important geopolitical economic relationship for the next generation, I would venture to say, many people have made much of the fact that China is going to overtake the United States in terms of the size of its economy, the strength of its economy. There are some questions about that now. Where are you on that question? And if, in fact, China is not as strong as we have thought it is, economically I'm talking about now, how does that affect the relationship?
I think it's almost like splitting hairs. There are two great powers, and the difference of overtake. If you take purchasing power parity, the size of GDP, they have slightly overtaken us. If you take the other, who knows? The main thing is they're comparable powers in many ways, having strengths. They can do they have a lot of dependency with each other, and they can do a lot of harm. So the most important thing, I think, is how we take care of ourselves. Can we get strong? Can we raise productivity? Can we be politically and economically cohesive so that we can be effective and strong? Because, you can't rule out China. Since I started to go to China, 1984, per capita income increased by 28 times. It's a power, and it's a smart power. So it's going to be like that. No, there's not a winner or a loser. There are only either you're going to have both winners or you're going to have both losers.
I think we're not quite sure how to deal with them. What is the way to have a relationship that we're going to have different systems? We're not going to agree on everything by any means, but we can really work with each other in a constructive way for the globe.
Fear. I have a saying, if you worry, you don't have to worry. And if you don't worry, you need to worry. Because if you worry, you will make sure that the thing you're worrying about doesn't happen. And right now, they're at the brink. And so the understanding of where the red lines are, and just like the Soviet Union, mutually assured destruction was the means by which we got through that. That notion of pushing each other will be the, just do not cross certain red lines. Chips are oil. In World War II, the United States shut off, embargoed Japanese oil, and they froze their assets, sanctions their bonds. It could be very analogous with chips and with bonds. There's worried about sanctions. Those kinds of, there's a limit to being strong, and then there's that issue. So I think restraint on both parties is going to be of paramount importance.
Going back to your point that first we have to start with our being strong, what we should be doing on our own about climate.
There'll be probably, I would expect, some superficial cosmetic attempts at cooperation on climate. The other more contentious issues will remain simultaneously. And yes, the climate issue was very interesting. When I did this study motivated by the first three of the last 500 years, I saw that acts of nature, droughts, floods, and pandemics, toppled more civilizations, caused more deaths than any of the things I mentioned before. And so climate is certainly an issue, and we're going to see, it's not like we're going to have great surprises, though great technologies are coming, but the worst is still ahead of us. I think you know enough about that to say that this is not an easy or inexpensive problem to handle. Fortunately, there have been great advances in many sorts of technology, but it's a long and expensive way to go.
It would not be easy or inexpensive if we all agreed on how to handle it. To some extent, this gets me back to your second issue, which is internal conflict. Because right now we see, for example, how many, 17 states, something like that, are adopting legislation to restrict their pension plans for making investments based on ESG. Can we address climate as a nation? Put aside China and the rest of the world. Can we address it as a nation when we have that kind of division, political division, over even addressing the question of climate?
Right. I mean, I'm not optimistic, particularly because it's also very expensive. And so what do you do when there's so many expenses? There's the climate issue. There's the social issues, education, poverty, and school districts. My wife works in some of the, to help out in some of the worst school districts. I'll give you an example. In Connecticut, which is always 1, 2, or 3 richest states in the country, 22% of the high school students are either dropped out of high school or have absentee rates of greater than 25% and are failing classes. And there's poverty in all these. So we have so many necessities, expenditures, and problems that we cannot agree on how to handle those problems. So there's a climate component to it, but there's a bigger, more fundamental component, which is why, I'm curious, and I hope that we will see a strong bipartisan middle beat the extremes in the political situation, because it is difficult.
Let's try to end on a hopeful note here and get to your fifth issue, which is technology or invention. You mentioned it earlier. You founded Bridgewater, and from everything I've read about Bridgewater, you put a great emphasis on the systems involved, the mechanics involved, the engine. It seems to me, without knowing about it, having done this for 25 years or so, that AI might apply to that fairly easily. Is that your sense? Where are we going with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I'm so excited because, as you say, for 25 years, I would always write down my investment principles, all my principles, and then I would convert them to algorithms, which became decision rules, which became systems, and everything would run, and they would, like setting up a computer chess game, it would play, I would play next to it, and we would then reconcile differences and we would learn together. Now what's happening with generative AI is that one can take all of that knowledge and have it there, and then go beyond that, to have it as a partner, a thought partner, because the intelligence has capacities that the human mind doesn't have. We don't, the ability to process so much and everything at the same time. So I'm extremely excited. I think that this is the greatest revolution, bigger than the internet revolution. But like technology, it really depends. The problem isn't with the technology. The problem is with the people who use the technology. Will that technology be used to raise humanity's living standards, or will that be used for war, in a sense, for hurting each other? And so, but any way we're going to cut it, if you take those 5, we're going to go through a time warp. If we take the next 5 to 10 years, in the next 5 to 10 years, it's like going to go through a time warp. We're going to come out the other side, and you're going to see a very completely different world.